Hello, my name is Robin Gray, and I will be proposing today the restoration of longleaf pine forests along their historical range. A little background on longleaf pines is that these forests were once one of the most dominant tree species stretched across the southeast United States, from East Texas to Virginia around 2 centuries ago. However, due to deforestation from logging and agricultural expansion and urbanization, the longleaf pines began to go extinct. Therefore, their ecosystems and biodiversity has become a major conservation concern, as their ecosystem provides a high diversity of species of plants and animals that are now considered endangered. One particular species that is most frequently identified with the longleaf pines ecosystem is the federally endangered red-cockaded woodpecker. Longleaf pines are also known for their fire-resistant abilities and their dependence on fire regimes to maintain their growth. These trees need fire to stimulate the flowering and seed production. Without fire, they would be replaced with invasive communities and they would not be able to prosper. Today, we find that only around 3.4 million acres of these longleaf forests are left across the 9 southern states. These ecosystems are found isolated and fragmented across public and private lands throughout the Southeast. Interest in restoring these forests have grown in recent decades, which has drawn in federal, state, non-governmental organizations, along with private landowners, to begin prioritizing the conservation and restoration of longleaf pines. As we propose the restoration of these longleaf pine populations across their historical range, the following will need to be established: understanding the stand structural diversity, creating high management plans, putting in place short and long-term goals, monitoring of ecological effects, and having outreach programs to find partners and stakeholders. By doing this, we will be able to create steps towards restoring these pine forests, if not to their original historical state, but possibly an altered trajectory to grow and prosper to a high supportive biodiversity. Longleaf pines are significant species throughout the southeastern states, and we have a responsibility to restore, conserve, and protect these endangered forests and their ecosystems. Therefore, we have specific aims that we would like to achieve. These include: number 1, gaining partnerships with private and public land agencies. Our milestone here would be partnering with private and public agencies so that we could incorporate new idealisms and combine modeling plans, such as the use of the dynamic reference model, that could help us create a baseline for any changes due to natural variation. By reaching out to each organization and preparing management plans, this process may take between 3 to 5 years, as combining current and future plans could take some time. If establishing specific goals and objectives, such as planning prescribed fires, spatial focal areas, understory restoration, etc., we will be able to increase the acreage of the current longleaf pines from around 4 to 8 million acres by 2025. For specific aim number 2, this would be monitoring stand structural diversity, which would be an important step or milestone in understanding the full diversity of each state's longleaf pine forests. In estimating and depicting large-scale patterns of structural diversity, the following specific objectives must be followed. Number 1, to establish structural diversity for the longleaf pine ecosystem and its relationship with the stand origin, ownership, burning, and sit condition. 2, to construct maps depicting spatial distribution and hotspots of structural diversity. 3, the use of publicly available FIA to provide information on the nation's forest inventory and key forest ecosystems. Once establishing these objectives, we would then investigate the status of the structural diversity to help us predict the overall spatial and distribution of these forests. This would approximately be within a 5-year period, as each state conducts FIA plot sampling annually with a measurement goal of 20% of FIA plots per year. As for our last specific aim, number 3, increase acreages of longleaf pine ecosystems by completion of a management plan. To enhance and protect the biodiversity of the natural communities of these forests, a management plan must be established toward short and long-term goals. The management plan will include some of the following: prescribed fires, manage competing vegetation, identify and prioritize habitat enhancement, and any silvicultural treatments. By completing this milestone, we will carry out our short and long-term assessments to understand and conserve longleaf pine lands. Short-term accomplishments are seen to take between 1 to 3 years, while long-term plans could take up to 5 to 15 years, depending on specific managing plans and models attributed to each situation type of longleaf pine forests. As for materials and methods for restoration of longleaf pines, we could see silvicultural treatments, prescribed burns, active surveying, active remote sensing, along with data from USGS Bison, USGS Ecosystem, and using Program R and ANOVA for statistical analysis, and ArcGIS for mapping spatial distribution. Here is an example of a map I made using ArcGIS spatial analysis, using geoprocessing, to represent longleaf pines distribution across the southeastern United States from 1970s to 2010s. We are able to visually see the longleaf pines as they fluctuate throughout the years. This map is just an example of how we are able to understand the history and background of pine forests, along with having potential of mapping current areas of study for restoration. For longleaf pine restoration along its historical range, our model would incorporate the dynamic reference model, have real-time surveying, continuous studies of the diversity within each forest, and record all species and habitats present before and after each treatment. And by creating this model of high-quality management plans, along with joint teams of private and public land agencies, we could see a future of increased acreages of longleaf forest and possibly the return of endangered species that live within their natural habitats. What makes our model different than previous studies is the unification of multiple variables, such as adding airborne laser scanning to help this structural diversity that will then coordinate with the dynamic reference model along with the management plans of both long and short-term goals of restoration. And finally, as I stated previously, longleaf pine forests need restoration efforts. This will require the knowledge of resource managers and scientists to create adaptive management plans. Therefore, if we can restore and protect the longleaf pine forest ecosystem, we may see an increase of new suitable habitats for those endangered species, and a positive step towards preservation of the longleaf pine forests.